It looks like we've got our unofficial brands here on the Fanzeal Sports Week in Review. I'm Justin Simon. That's Brandon Boykin. Check out Fanzeal at fanzeal.com or on Twitter at Fanzeal. I'm apparently being sponsored by Tom's this morning and Lovely Coffee. And Brandon's already helped his Adidas shoes. Normally, we are in the studio every week doing this week in review, but we had some travel issues, some timing issues, and plus with everything going on this weekend, we didn't really want to wait to get to all of the action that went on. A big week in baseball, big week in the NFL, big week in college football, some major news coming out of the NBA. But even more than that, you'll notice I am no longer wearing an Eagle shirt because I don't have to. Right, I feel like we should take a moment to applaud that because even though it was ugly and even though they barely hung on, my Philadelphia Eagles finally won a game.
Barely. Did I not tell you? Remember, I texted you earlier that day. I said DeMarco Murray's not playing. This is a sign.
Yeah, well, not such a good sign for either of my two fantasy teams, which both have Murray on them and currently have Murray on the bench. But that's something I can bitch about later.
It could be worse. He could still be like the rest of the Cowboys, hurt.
Yeah, man, the Cowboys, they're in bad shape, which I love as an Eagles fan.
Hey, but aren't they still leading the division?
Cowboys are, but the Eagles are tight on their tails. And if they can beat Washington this week, if they can beat Washington, hey, look, we held on to everything.
Did you just say that?
The Giants should be 3-0.
Did you really just say if they can beat Washington?
Look, it's in a hurricane, potentially. If you looked at the second half of the Falcons game and the first half of the game last week, you'd say, okay, against the Jets, you'd say, oh, wow, the Eagles are really good. If you look at any other half of football they've had all year, they're like the bad news Bears out there. They're terrible.
Yeah, they look a step above Chicago, and that's just because based on the talent that they have. But they have looked quite a bit lost out there at times. Yeah. But then, like you said, at times they look fantastic. They just got to put it together. I mean, that's why you play 4 quarters, man.
Yep.
You got to have play a complete game and see what you can make work out there. I do think, and I know that there are a lot of Philly fans that have been kind of on the brink with this. I'm starting to think that DeMarco Murray was not the right pick for them. I just don't think that he works in the schemes that they run.
Well, I get what you're saying. I also get he's played in 2 games.
Yeah.
Right. So let's and the first game, the Eagles offensive line could have been you and I for how well they were blocking. And that's no, slight on you and I, but we couldn't stop a legitimate NFL front 4. Right?
Yeah.
And the Eagles offensive line didn't look like they could either. Nobody was running. In game 2, I'm not exactly sure why he couldn't make any, any movement, any progress, anything, but neither here nor there. Anyhow, we're going to get back to football. We're going to be talking about every game this weekend. If you join us at 9:30 Pacific, 12:30 Eastern, Sunday morning, Brandon and I are back with the Fanzeal NFL Whip Around. I don't have the current stats in front of me, and that's simply because Brandon's leading me in the standings, so I don't want to bring them up this week. But we're going to pick every game. We'll tell you who to watch in fantasy. We'll be sending out a couple tweets reminding you, but make sure you're there for that because I think you're really going to want to interact. We'll open up the seats. We'll take your questions, and that's a quick, fun half hour. Before we get to Sunday football, my man, baseball, almost every division figured out. The Blue Jays clinch this week. The Rangers clinch this week. The Yankees get their playoff spot. The NL Central's decided that it's going to be Cubs and the Pirates in the wild card. The Cardinals become, again, the best team in baseball. There's still some questions about who's going to end up with the best record in the AL. And you've got that second and third, the 2 wild card spots in the AL still kind of the second wild card spot still kind of up for grabs with the Astros and the Angels.
Mm-hmm.
Of the playoff teams this year, who is the biggest surprise to you?
The Yankees.
Really?
By far. And I'm a Yankee fan. But nobody expected them to turn that group into a playoff contender. They had some injuries, and you had some dudes resurrect themselves from the dead because this looks like pre-juice A-Rod out there almost. I mean, the dude was killing the ball earlier in the season, You had the injury to Tanaka. Teixeira's been banged up pretty much most of the year. But they've had a lot of production out of no-name guys that have just pretty much come out of the woodwork. And it's really helped them and propelled them. I don't think anyone even thought they had a shot at a wild card spot.
Yeah, look, I mean, their average age on the team, I think, is 72. This is the Satchel Paige All-Stars. You didn't know what you were going to get from A-Rod. Teixeira hasn't been healthy and, of course, ends the season not healthy. The shortstop situation, you didn't know what was going to happen following Jeter. You got a very old and off-injured outfield. And even if they're not that old, they feel old because of how often Ellsbury and the guys, keep seemingly get hurt. But got to give Girardi credit. He mixed and matched a brilliant bullpen, which is what he often gets criticized for. They somehow had enough starting pitching to get through a season, which I agree with you. I don't know how they did it. CC was generally terrible. A lot of injuries. They had I don't know how many starters they threw out there this year, but it had to be at least a dozen, if not more. So give them credit. I think maybe the biggest surprise for me is the fact that Detroit wasn't even in the running in the AL Central this year. With that team, with that offense, and I know Mickey got hurt, and I know some of the guys didn't pitch, but Kansas City had this thing on lockdown, and it was the Twins who were giving them, a little run for their money late in the season. Detroit wasn't even in the picture. They're going to finish last in the division. That, I think, is one of the biggest baseball surprises to me.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, you see a lot of teams that are trying to follow the old Yankee model and just get the most talented guys out there and pay them whatever. It doesn't work for everybody. No. It's a reason that it only worked for the Yankees a few times. Look at the Dodgers payroll.
Yep.
And mind you, they've been solid and they made the playoffs, but for that kind of payroll, it shouldn't even be in question. For what the kind of quiche that some of these dudes in Detroit are making, I mean, they at least play like you care. I mean, you and I, we and I know we've had conversations about playing the right way, and especially if you're getting paid for it and getting paid good money. And some of these guys, it looked like they almost kind of gave up halfway through the season. I mean, I don't know how much the losing does to your psyche that maybe controls the element that you're putting on the field. But I just seemed like a lot of those guys seemed disinterested from around the All-Star break. They knew they
weren't going to win. They knew they didn't have the firepower. And the whole Dombrowski mess. But let's go back to the Dodgers, because you're right. They won the NL West. They're a playoff team consecutive seasons. But with that payroll, if this team doesn't win the World Series, and by the way, they haven't shown they can get by the Cards, and the Cards are facing some injuries, and I wouldn't want to face either the Cubs or the Pirates in a short series. If those guys, if their top two on each team can go 4 games, I know that Greinke and Kershaw are the best pitchers in the world, but you could see, a 2-1 game, a 3-2 game where you end up losing. If they don't win the World Series this year, how big of a disaster is it for the Dodgers?
I don't think it's a disaster. I think it's going to make them take a look at their processing as far as what they're doing. I think if they don't make it to the World Series this year, I think Yasiel Puig is gone.
Yep, I agree.
And look for him to end up with the Yankees. Remember, you heard it here first. I've been saying all along, at some point.
Don't forget, there could be an opening in New York if they don't re-sign Cespedes.
Yeah.
The Mets are going to have that need.
Well, and since you bring that up, and Cespedes is another one of my players that I really like. Why the hell is this dude getting traded every summer? And the dude is knocking the snot out of the ball. I mean, doesn't seem like he's a cancer in the locker room. I mean, the dude, every time I turn on SportsCenter, he's on there making a play. And he's like the only person from the Mets that I see walk-off home run, making a diving catch in the outfield. So why is this dude getting traded every summer?
Well, he is the reason, almost single-handedly, from an offensive side, why the Mets are going to be in the playoffs.
Yes.
Trade, he's been unbelievable. But that's why he's going to look for that 6-year, 110, 120 million contract. And
I think he's going north of that.
Right, but that's the problem. A lot of people in baseball are saying, I can't give you a 6-year contract based off 2.5 months of great work. He didn't fit in Boston, didn't work out at all. Detroit was happy to get rid of him. He's been traded a few times now, like you said. I haven't heard any clubhouse rumors, but if everybody's willing to get rid of him, and there are some smart GMs that did, could he not be worth that money over the course of a full season, over 2 seasons, over 3, and certainly over 6 as he gets older?
Yeah, I mean, I know they say where there's smoke, there's fire, but I mean, dude, look at what he did in Oakland. I mean, we all remember the ridiculous all-star plays that he was making out there, the catching and gunning the dude out, and like it was nothing. The guy hits a walk-off home run like once a week, like it's just the thing to do. When you look at the contracts that some of these other dudes are getting, why not him? I mean, would you rather have Cespedes or would you have Robinson Cano?
No, I mean, look, I get what you're saying, and well, that's a good question. It depends on the money, and because Cano's second half was significantly better and a harder position to fill. But you got to think, like, let's assume, for argument's sake, right now, that the best 3 general managers in baseball are John Mazzick in St. Louis, Billy Beane in Oakland, and Dave Dombrowski in Detroit. 2 out of the 3 of them got rid of this guy. So I've got to assume they know something I don't.
I think it's more of an analytics thing than it is an actual player thing, because the guy is passing the eye test. I mean, in Detroit, Boston, but there were a lot of other things going on in those places. Now, I think the one thing that Cespedes is missing, he does not have the leadership quality. Cespedes and Yasiel Puig are very similar players to me. Cespedes is just not he's not as out there as Puig as far as media-wise and public front-wise, but at least the guy can stay on the field.
Yeah, no, he's a legit power threat. I'll give you all that. And look, with the Mets pitching, that's another staff I don't really want to face. Harvey plays pitching twice. Noah's in there. There's just a lot of options, a lot of young arms. That's going to be a good team for a long time, assuming the Mets don't screw it up.
Yeah, if they can keep them together. And let's just face it, this is the Mets.
Yeah.
It's a reason why the Mets and the Knicks share the same colors.
Well, look, anytime the Mets lose, it's like a good day for me, just because they're one of those annoying teams. They're like the Braves. You just can't. You're like the Reds to me. You're like, oh, why are you winning baseball games? We're going to get to football here in a minute because there's a lot going on, and we're going to get to basketball with the Steve Kerr back surgeries and how that's going to impact the Warriors. But I want to touch on one more baseball thing that happened this week. Jonathan Papelbon, noted douche, goes after Bryce Harper, who is hands down the NL MVP. Aside from the fact that Bryce Harper's got, the bad reputation and the whole deal, this is another one of those unwritten nonsense baseball rules. And we saw this happen again in the Twins game this week with the bat flip, and now the teams are, we're going to have to hit him tomorrow. The Diamondbacks are known for this. If they think anybody's slighted them at all, we're going to, there's an unwritten rule where, we've got to hit your guy back. Batters are starting to get tired of it because they're saying, look, you hit their best guy on mistake, on an obvious, guys on first and second, there's no outs, a curveball hits you in the back. I obviously didn't mean to do that. And yet, the response is going to be, well, now we've got to hit one of your guys. At what point,
got to go back and
At what point does the injury possibility and the stupidity potential of this entire kind of concept of unwritten rules, especially when it comes to beating somebody, when is MLB going to do something about it?
You know what? I think they're afraid to, and I'll tell you why. Because there's too much of old baseball that still think that it's right, because this is the way that we've always done it. And unfortunately, that tradition is kind of what's been killing baseball. Baseball is never going to have the viewer numbers that the NFL or that the NBA is going to have.
It's a local game. It's a local team, for sure.
Yeah, it's just not a watchable product on TV like that. It doesn't grab you. So when stuff like this happens, it makes the fan even more confused because it's like, really? Okay, now we've got something else that's going to delay the game, yada, yada, yada. Baseball, you've got a lot of young stars that they really need to be pushing. And they've got to kind of take away from the old and kind of push in with the new. And some of this old tradition, the being in the guys, and man, you got to do away with that. You got 40 dudes over in this dugout, and you got at least 30 millionaires. A millionaire is not somebody who's got $1 million in their bank account. A millionaire is somebody who's got $1 million they can afford to lose out of their bank account. So you got at least 30 millionaires over there, and none of these dudes want to take a ball to the face, and they could lose their career in their season. So it's just not worth it. I mean, man, guys just say, okay, dude, you got one on me, fine. The bat flips and all that, dude, it's all YouTube. It's all fanfare. And this is, that's actually what makes people want to go to the game. I've been accused of being cocky and sometimes on the field, but I like the bat flip. I like when Harper goes out and cranks one over the fence and then runs to the dugout and dips the helmet down and then whips there. Dude, I love that. That's secondary only to the Ric Flair. Woo! Dude, that's what the game needs, and that's for baseball to really prosper the way that it needs to, and for them to market the stars that they want to. That's what they have to allow to happen. They got to nip this in the bud. Now, whether that's automatic suspensions for guys, heavier fines, things like that, I don't know what it is, but they've got to make it a watchable product for people for TV, and for people are bringing their kids to watch the game, and they want to see everybody wants to see the long ball. So as a pitcher, hey, this dude hits one 420 feet, let it go, because the next dude after him is about to hit it 440 feet. What are you going to do? Beat everybody that plays for Toronto?
Right.
Because five of that order. Well, they got 5 dudes in that lineup that can all crank it 400 feet easy.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Every night you're going to go up against a team that's got at least 3 dudes that can take you 420 legit, and
you can't hit them all. You can't hit them all.
Yeah, you can't hit them all. And you know what? They say, it's being cocky, and you know what? If you're a pro athlete and you're not cocky, you're like a diamond in the damn rough, because it just doesn't happen. You don't make it to the pro level without having some kind of cockiness. Right. So you know what? Some of it you got to accept it, and some of it you just got to push it on. I think that's part of old baseball that we need to bury. Make a watchable product for the consumer. I mean, bring on the bat flips and the hair shakes, and hell, I want to see some home run dances, like when they get to the plate and can get a little Cabbage Patch, a little icky shuffle, something. Cold cuts, baby.
Can we get Big Poppy doing the Running Man? I mean, I'd pay price of admission to see that.
A Big Poppy moonwalk on home plate would be wonderful.
That'd be amazing. That'd be on every highlight reel ever. You brought up, an interesting point, though, and baseball for a while now, it's been about a decade where people every year keep pointing out that there are not enough black players in Major League Baseball. But and certainly that, culturally is going to add to some of the flair. If you look at, the NFL, if you look at the NBA, right? But beside that, USA Today came out with a story this week. They looked at the past 5 seasons at the fights and the bench clearing brawls and found that 87% of them were caused by kind of a ethnic divide, primarily white players versus Latino players.
Mm-hmm.
They've got to figure this out, man, because Latino players are becoming the heart and soul of the game. You're still going to have a majority of white players. You're going to have an influx from Asia, and you're starting to see some even Europeans come in. You can't have a giant ethnic divide in a sport where half the locker room is an ethnic divide.
No, you can't. And 2 things. I can give you my take on why there's far less black players, and I think it's a very very simple answer. It's 2 parts to it, but it's a very simple answer. One, if you drive through most hoods, predominantly black Latino neighborhoods, in just about anywhere you go, but let's use LA. as an example. How many baseball fields?
Right. There's not
Very
actually a place to play.
Yeah. Right now, baseball, it's not a sport that's pushed in those areas. You have great athletes at those schools, but those athletes they'd rather go to play football or basketball.
Sure.
One, because they don't have the facilities, but two, it's also to them they view it as a faster route. Baseball has always been deemed the safe sport, but it's also going to it's a longer process because you got to play AAA, AA. You wonder if you get called up. You may get called up by the time you're 25. Hell, you can be 17 and graduate and make it to the NBA. If not, well,
right. You got the one and done year.
Yeah.
Whether or not you go play 1 year of college or 1 year overseas, which, by the way, if you go overseas, you're getting paid for.
You make bucks.
Look, I get that, but I want to bring it back to, and I think there's probably about 5 or 6 reasons we could look at, why the Major League Baseball has a problem getting high-end black players in. And it's not just because Torrey Hunter at the age of 75 is still going to be playing next year.
You can still jump over the wall.
Right. Yes, he can. But what do we do about this? And there may not be an answer, by the way. This may be one of those bigger problems than we can answer on a blab. Although we do want to open this up to the Fanzeal community. So if you have a answer as to what baseball should do about its growing white player, Latino player divide, tweet it at us at Fanzeal, hit us up on the Facebook page, or comment on this, video once we pop it up on YouTube, because it's a big problem, and I don't know that there's a simple answer.
No, I mean it goes back to Jackie Robinson and what did they do back then, and what are they? You would think by now the game would have progressed enough to where we wouldn't be having these issues. 50 some odd years later, almost 60 years later after Jackie Robinson. I do think part of it is not so much a jealousy thing as far as the racial divide, but it's a thing of feeling like you're protecting what you have, because there are a lot of players, and I don't think necessarily just white players, but there are a lot of players that are in the majors, and they see this influx of all these players coming from Cuba and from the DR and from Japan, and they're like, damn, dude, I thought I had a solid 8-10 year career. I was just gonna coast and make this little $9 million a season. Well, now they got this kid coming from the Dominican Republic. This dude can't even speak a word of English, but dude's got an arm. He can play the field, yada yada yada, and they're willing to bring him in for like a quarter of what I'm making. So They're automatically getting on the defensive, and it's already testy during a game, and all you need is one thing to happen, and guys, they put out that rally cry, and unfortunately, that's the only thing that it seems like they're connecting on, and they feel like, hey, you're bringing in all these foreign players to take our jobs. You don't see this issue in the NBA.
No, and there's also the oversimplification that it's a group of Latino players. There are different Latino countries and Hispanic countries that don't like each other. DR and Venezuela and Puerto Rico, and we're starting to see different players from all these places, and they don't all like each other. This is not, this is one of those oversimplification things where, like, okay, well, because the census checkbox is over here, we have to group you all into one category. But, I'd be real interested to see if they did a study and they broke it down when the fights happen or the arguments happen between Hispanic players. Is there a country of origin that continuously is going after another country's players?
Yeah.
I want to stop us here, though, because I want to get off baseball. We've got, between roughly about 10 more minutes left. We're here at the Fanzeal Week in Review. That's Brandon Boykin. I'm Justin Simon. Every week, we are here looking at the best in sports. Every Sunday morning at 9:30 Pacific, 12:30 Eastern, we do our Fanzeal NFL Whip Around. Head over to fanzeal.com, sign up for the Zeal, which is the funniest newsletter in sports. Comes out every Monday morning. Lots of stuff that you'll just have a good time laughing at. The defending NBA champion Warriors, great team, amazing team. But you could argue, and I would, that one of the things that made them so good last year was not just one more year of talent and one more year of maturity, But Steve Kerr in close games was brilliant. The moves he made, the plays he put in when it came down to the wire. Look, there may have been a difference in 5 wins, 6 wins, and that's home court advantage throughout, the entire playoffs. And I bring that up because you and I were talking earlier this week, and when it was announced that Steve Nash would be coming in to help, that all of those things would matter. But the news comes out now. I believe it was last night, middle of the day yesterday, that Steve Kerr is not going to be with the team, quote unquote, indefinitely. After 2 back surgeries, he was in training camp for all of about 32 seconds, and he realized this is not healthy. I can't do this. So the expectation is he's going to be back for the season. But even though they're a veteran team, even though they're coming off a championship, how much does it hurt the Warriors not to have their head coach in training camp? Luke Walton will be taking over, which is, probably a couple years too early for him to be a head coach, though I think he'll end up being a good one. And you're right, they did bring Steve Nash in, but he was supposed to do player development. Brilliant player, brilliant strategist, saw the court like very few in history, and he can help some things. But how much of a loss do you think Kerr is? And how much is dependent upon how long he's gone?
Those are 2 different issues. How much of a loss if he's back before Christmas? I don't think it's that big of a loss. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm looking at like a 3.
Okay.
Kerr was brilliant last year. You look at the coaching staff he has, and the one consistent thing is it's a tree of Phil Jackson. So they believe in the system.
Yep.
Now, when you have the right players that can –
lost Alvin Gentry, who was huge for them last year. He's in New Orleans now. If you would have told me, okay, we're handing the team over training camp to Alvin Gentry, a guy with NBA head coaching experience, a guy who's a very, very solid coach, well-respected around the league, I'd say, okay, no big deal. But now you've got guys who are, the Luke Waltons of the world. You're down to your second assistant, your third assistant type guy to run training camp. And, yeah, you got Clay and you got Curry and you got Barnes and you got, a veteran team where it's returning most of the championship team. But you still have to put in new plays. You still have to install new defensive rotations. You've got to look at teams differently because teams changed in the offseason, so you have to scout them differently.
Yeah. I think defensively is where they're going to notice the biggest hit as far as of losing Gentry. Offensively, I don't think that we're really going to notice much. If anything, I think they're going to run the ball a bit more, and that's why they brought Stevie Cash in there. He's going to be in his little X-Man wheelchair and rolling up and down the court and barking out orders to Curry. Stevie Cash could have stayed in L.A. and did the same thing since we already gave him $27 million from the hike and golf.
Oh, get over the sour grapes.
Hey, I'm just saying, the dude's really –
with a history of injuries, and he got injured. It is what it is.
I mean, I'm not mad at him for taking his money and running and getting it, but there's just a better way of doing it. That being said,
I know he wasn't running. He took the money and hobbled away.
No, he was running, just not on the basketball court. He was running on the soccer field and everywhere else. So
fair.
But that said, I think Stevie Cash is going to be a good addition for them offensively, and he primarily was probably brought in for that to work with Curry and probably get them some more open sets. I expect them to run a little bit more of a motion offense while Kerr is out. Walton, I think Walton will surprise some people. He's coached under some good coaches, and he's a student of the game.
Smart guy.
Very smart player. He never really got by on his athleticism. It was always by his intelligence and Dad's name. But I still expect to see Golden State in the top 4 for as far as standings for next season.
I think that's even underestimating them. If they're not a top 2 team in the West, I'd be surprised. But again, I think that Kerr, look, if he's back before the end of training camp, this is a non-issue. But If his back doesn't respond, if he can't stand on the sidelines, if he can't get up and coach, I agree with you. The NBA season doesn't really start till Christmas, but that's an issue. Look, we only have a couple more minutes left on the Fanzeal Sports Week in Review, and there's one more story that I do want to get to, because for the first time since 2009, Alabama is going to be the underdog in a college football game. Is this a blip, or is this the beginning of the end of the Nick Saban era at Alabama, and he starts looking for his new challenge?
I think this is a very big blip. Ole Miss has some of the nastiest and biggest linemen I've ever seen in college that are still playing college football.
And they crushed him twice.
Yeah. So I don't see any major issue with them losing to them. Now, that being said, I think they're about to take out a can of whoop ass on the next team that they play, and I think Saban's he's gonna try to get a point across.
Well, and it's Georgia, and so he doesn't like them at all. It's an SEC match.
I'm expecting at least a 35-point blowout.
Oh, I'll take that action. I'll take that. We're putting a cocktail on that. We don't bet cash here at Fanzeal because that would be illegal, and we don't believe in illegal activities. But I'm putting a cocktail on that. You're putting a 35-point blowout?
Yeah.
You're out of your skull. I think this is actually going to be the beginning of the end at Saban. I think he's been there a while. I think he's bored. I think he's looking for a new challenge. I agree that Ole Miss, is a huge offense and a really good team. They're up, I think number 3 in the rankings now. And, for those who don't know, if you saw the movie Blindside with Sandra Bullock, which won some, major awards, Hugh Freeze, who is the coach at Ole Miss, was the coach of the high school team, and Michael Orr, that is profiled in that book. There's your little bit of who cares sports trivia for your morning. But I think that Nick Saban gets through this year, maybe does one more. But, look, he's already started giving interviews about what he did wrong in the NFL and what he could have done differently and how he approached it differently. And there's not going to be any shortage of checkbooks, coming his way.
Okay, but realistically, where can you see him landing in the NFL? The only job that I can see him landing in the NFL is the 49er job. Nothing else is going to appeal to him because everything else is going to be a major step down.
All right, well, if you're watching this blab right now, I want you to watch Brandon Boykin's face when I say this because I already know what's coming up. The New York Giants job is going to be open next year, and it's the only one with a legit NFL quarterback because Eli is going –
You just say legit?
The only opening job with a starting quarterback. I know he's not elite, but it's the only opening job. And look, it's like the sun is shining on your face, so you can't even,
No, it's because it knows I'm about to go off on you. Okay, let me ask you this: who would you rather have as your quarterback, Eli or Colin Kaepernick?
Eli Manning. I think Colin Kaepernick is not a quality NFL quarterback. I think Jim Harbaugh was smart enough to make it work somehow. I think he can't throw outside. I think he's jittery. I think for all of Manning's faults, he can run an NFL offense.
Have you watched Eli Manning this season?
I have.
The Dallas game.
The Giants should be 3-0. The Giants ought to be 3-0 right now.
I should be 6'9" and a millionaire.
Well, you should, but neither of those things is happening. His was at least close. They had the lead in the 2 games they lost late into the fourth quarter, right? They should. If the Giants are 3-0 right now, I agree with you. Eli's contract still looks ridiculous, but it looks a lot less ridiculous.
Colin Kaepernick's contract is easier to swallow than Eli.
Sure, but that's not a coach's problem.
Yeah.
The coach, Nick Saban isn't going anywhere. He doesn't have a legit quarterback. And I can't see anywhere else that has a legitimate quarterback unless you think Miami and Tannehill is legit, because that's going to be open. And that's, look, a good defense. It's in a good city if you're, to coach in. If you believe Tannehill's a legit NFL quarterback or you can make him one, then that's at least appealing. Who knows what's going to happen in Houston? I don't think they're going to get rid of Bill O'Brien because I think they know that, the quarterback situation there is a mess. but that's a possibility. I don't think Jeff Fisher's in danger, but again, another mediocre year, and what happens there? Rivera's in no trouble in Carolina. He was on the hot seat for a little while, but he's officially off that now. Anywhere with a legitimate quarterback, it doesn't really have an opening, except for the Giants.
You think Sean Payton's on the hot seat in New Orleans?
Yes, I do, but I don't believe that Drew Brees is still going to be an elite NFL quarterback over the next 3 years. I think he's 37 years old. He's coming off another shoulder injury. I think Drew Brees is an instant Hall of Famer, first ballot guy. But if you need to build a team and start a team from scratch over the next 3 years, Brees not only isn't your guy, but remember, Drew Brees is a collaborator. Nick Saban's a dictator. So that's a bad fit anyway.
Very true.
Look, it's going to be interesting. I'm going to win my cocktail when Alabama does not win by 35 points or even close. And I'm going to win 2 cocktails, by the way, when Georgia actually wins. I'm upping that bet. The straight victory cocktail edition bet. But it's going to be a good weekend, and I'm very much looking forward to football. I'm looking forward to the Major League Baseball playoffs. We will be back here next week on the Fanzeal Week in Review. Send us some tweets at Fanzeal. Let us know, kind of what you want us to touch on. If you have any questions, we'll get into that. Check out fanzeal.com. Sign up for the Zeal, the best in sports newsletter. It will make you laugh, and it will certainly make you want to yell at us a little bit. That's the goal of it. A little controversial sometimes. And, more than anything else, Sunday mornings, 9:30 a.m. Pacific, 12:30, right before the games start Eastern. Brandon and I are here for the NFL Whip Around. We're going to touch on every game. We're going to show you who to talk about and pick in your daily fantasy leagues. And we're going to have a lot of fun doing it. So we appreciate you coming out. Check us out at youtube.fanzealsports. Well, I guess that'd be youtube.com/fanzealsports. I'm still in my, morning coffee, right? Brandon's, finger typing that out. And we'll see you all here next week. Thanks for hanging out here in this Blab.